coming to you all the way from the city of Miami in the Sunshine State of Florida, bringing you the latest in the LGBTQ plus community. This is the FayWhat Show with your host, FayWhat.
Hi everyone, buenas noches mi gente, and welcome to FayWhat Show. FayWhat! So our show's mission is to entertain, educate, and unite our community with real-life topics in a safe, positive, and fun environment, because together we win, and you know what? Divided we fall. Ya lo sabes. So our table topics are human topics. They're conversations that need to be had, and we aren't afraid to have them. Some are more serious than others, right? Because there's no more being in the closet with our thoughts and what's truly important to us in the LGBTQ community. We have so many traditions in modern day. Have you ever considered the origins of them? You know, some of these traditions came from paganism, and many of the things that we do every day don't seem to have any connection to religion at all, but they still got their start, okay, from religion. Even more surprising, there are traditions that we associate with specific religions like Christianity that most definitely got their start in other religions. So today we're going to take a look at modern things with pagan origins. Which one will surprise you the most? We will see. And to help us with this journey, I asked a really good friend of mine, Gordon Woodworth III, who is a member of the pagan community of South Florida and the pagan community online, to guide us through these traditions. And we're going to learn something too. And at the end of our show, like we always do, we got to bring you a funny segment, because it's all about being funny. Humor is like the best medicine ever. You're having an ugly day? Laugh. Your hair is out of place? Laugh. You know, you need a pedicure and your feet look all jacked up? Laugh. You ran out of gas on 95? Call AAA. But you know what I mean, right? So, and we'll finish our segment with What Do You Mean? I know that's one of your favorites, right? All right, so let's begin. Our guest today, Gordon Woodworth III. He's a Druid, a Unitarian Universalist, a member of the British Druid order and the order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. Okay, I'm going to have to ask him to make sure that I said all of that right. Being a longtime member of the pagan community of South Florida and the pagan community online, Gordon has had the opportunity to work with and learn from some of the most prominent pagans from around the globe with a diversity of religious backgrounds. So Gordon is the founder of Pagans in VR and virtual reality, an online community of pagan people in virtual reality with the mission of promoting, understanding, and practicing of pagan religions. They are also an active member of the Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans and have served as a facilitator of many public rituals in person, remotely, and in VR. Gordon also works for Broward House. Love you guys, love Broward House, a nonprofit that is dedicated to the all-around care of people living with HIV and AIDS. Gordon lives in South Florida near Sunrise with their loving husband, Demetrius, who I love, and their furry family of all 3 cats and a dog. Yes, come on, us gays, we love our pets. We love our pets. Welcome to the show, Gordon.
Well, thank you for having me, Faye.
How are you, honey?
I'm great. The traffic to get here was horrible.
Welcome to
I'm
Miami.
Great.
That's kind of part of it. Thank you for saying yes, my friend.
I'm glad you invited me. Anytime I can come and talk about paganism with people, I'm thrilled to do it.
Well, and you're such an interesting person, because that's not, you know, I can have you on the show for like 5 other reasons too. This was actually like, I wanted to get you on the show so bad, and Halloween was around the corner, and that got me thinking about paganism, and you're my go-to when it comes to that. So here you are. So thank you for sitting in. How long have you been part of the pagan community?
Oh, geez. Since I was about 17. And
now
20.
You're 18?
No, I'm 26 on the 23rd. It'll be 26. So was that 9 years?
Yeah, no, but that's a good amount of time. Okay, how about this? In a short version, what is paganism?
So paganism, it's a complicated answer to that question.
Yeah, I know. I can imagine. My apologies for that.
So if you want to look it up in the dictionary, you might see that it refers to any religion that is not Judeo-Christian.
Okay.
So not atheism, not humanism, religions. Mm-hmm. So technically people like Buddhists and Taoists could be considered pagan as well.
Okay.
But they typically refer to themselves just as Buddhists,
or
Taoists, or Hindus even. They refer to themselves as Hindus.
Okay.
But pagan is a word that's popular mostly in the English-speaking world, and usually the people that refer to themselves as pagan are people who practice religions that are somehow connected to nature, and the idea that we're connected to it, or the universe, or there's some kind of magical tradition There's some exceptions to that Judeo-Christian rule. For example, there's ceremonial magicians who practice a tradition of magic that's rooted in Jewish mysticism.
Really?
Yes. So there's a lot of different
Wow.
people that fall under that umbrella term.
For some reason, I thought it was a much smaller community than that.
No,
That's
it's huge.
ginormous.
And the word is actually comes from ancient Rome. Christians who were converting all of Rome's territories, the way it worked was the people in the city tended to convert first before the people in the country did.
Why was that?
Just because that's the way culture spreads. There's more people
Word of
together.
mouth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they tend to refer to people who were not converted as pagan because pagan means people of the country.
Got it. People of the country. All right. Okay. So you're LGBTQ. This is an LGBTQ show. Are there lots of pagans that are part of our community?
Oh, yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say that, there's a huge overlap between paganism and the gay community for a multitude of reasons. The main one being that...
Most religions don't accept us.
Right. But pretty much all the pagan religions do.
Okay.
Even to the point that even in ancient times, relationships between people of the same sex were accepted and engendered in different societies. There was definitely polyamory, and being trans was also a thing. There's definitely examples in myths of different cultures of gods who we today would call trans or non-conforming.
Okay, so for all those people out there that, we've all got that Trump friend, right? We've all got that friend that is not educated at all in our community and thinks some dumb shit, right? Okay. Trans, we did not invent that. We didn't just wake up one day and boys wanted to be girls and girls wanted to be boys. That's not how that all came about. Nope. We're cool, but we didn't invent it. Okay, this has been for centuries.
Right. And in ancient times, they wouldn't have used the same terminology we do.
Of course.
LGBTQ wasn't coined yet, if you will. But it was looked on as more like this is a natural way of existing, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't really until much later, really with the introduction of monotheism, that started to be an issue.
Okay. Now, I read a story a couple of weeks ago, and it's something you probably already know. LGBTQ, we're not really religious because of most churches don't really welcome us for who we are, Mm-hmm. But we are so bonded in faith. We do believe in something, and we crave that.
It's each other.
We crave that, and it is each other. Yeah. So do you think that, someone that is yearning for that spiritualism, for that group love, paganism would be the way for them to go?
I think for a lot of gay people it is. Mm-hmm. Because, with all these different religions we're talking about, and if I can just be brief, the biggest one, at least here in the United States, would be Wicca, followed by Druidry, and then Thelema and Norse paganism, heathenism, Asatru, what have you, and then Voodoo, Hoodoo, Santeria, Brujeria. Okay.
In no particular order, right?
In no particular. Wicca definitely has the most.
Okay.
It's hard to know how many Brujeria people and Santerians there are because they don't tell you.
They don't tell you. Yeah. They just end up putting your picture on a doll and then sticking needles in it. Somewhere along the line a coconut is involved. I don't know. I'm just saying.
When you've been oppressed that hard for that long, you won't tell people either.
Yeah.
But where was I going with this? All these different religions, for the most part, a lot of them stress the idea of community and family and togetherness that we all share. And, one of the main examples I like to give to people who are outside of paganism is, if you go into a Christian church, and I always think of the Catholic Church because that's what my family is. You go in there and you have the priest and whoever up on the altar, and then everybody else is sitting in pews in a different section. It does not work that way in paganism. We are all in the same space. We're typically all on the same level, and we're all participating in what's happening here.
So is there a reverend or a pastor that kind of leads it?
There are people who facilitate rituals.
Facilitate it, and you do that at times, correct?
I do that a lot, actually. I'm doing that tomorrow night, because tomorrow night's full moon.
Okay.
Different traditions will have different grades or levels of leadership, and it varies from tradition to tradition. So Wiccans, for example, a lot of them have a 3-grade system, and it's you go through training to get to the third level, and then you can become a high priest or a high priestess after a time. And
Is there a fee to do that?
usually no. A lot of pagan people aren't very wealthy. That's the other thing. But that's just Wicca. In other traditions like my own, in Druidry, we don't do that at all. We have, in Obod, for example, we have a chieftain, and, some Druid orders, they'll have a chieftain, and then they'll have flamens, which are kind of like...
The gay ones.
No, they're kind of like bishops, if you will. But those are typically elected positions, and they're
So majority rules kind of deal. Group,
yes.
again.
So the heart of Druidry for most orders is the idea that democracy is an ethic that we want to promote all over the world.
Okay. So do you go to Sunday, do you go to temple? Do you go to a place? Do you go to brunch after because we're fabulous? I mean, like, how...
Yeah, so I'm also a Unitarian Universalist, so I definitely go to church, but, it's Universalists, and, there's a lot of pagan people in my church as well. But for pagan folks who are not Unitarian Universalist, and myself, most of us celebrate a cycle of holidays called the Wheel of the Year. And those are the solstices, the equinoxes, and the midpoints between them.
Okay.
And they all have cultural origins. They manifest differently from culture to culture, but typically, especially in the places we're really talking about, which is like Northern Hemisphere, European, all those, the people who would call themselves pagans, those would be, on those solstices and equinoxes, they are feasts and harvests and times of gathering. And they're really out of necessity, because...
You got to eat.
Yeah, I mean, most of these religions are coming from a time when people are living, their whole life is based on how well their crops are doing, how well their livestock is doing, and the religion very much reflects that. There's an understanding that the earth has to do well in order for me to do well.
So and you said tomorrow you're doing a full moon.
Yeah.
Right. So is that a ritual? Is that a feast? Are you saying thank you? What are you actually doing?
Yeah, that would be a ritual. It's more of a celebration. So the common term for that, for those Wheel of the Year holidays, is a Sabbat, which is actually where the
Jewish, right? Isn't that Jewish stuff?
Yeah, that's where the origin of that word, it comes from paganism.
All right.
And then moved into Christianity to become the Sabbath. So, it's all connected. The Wheel of the Year holidays they would call Sabbats, and then the moons they would call Esbats, which means it's like a less important celebration, but still
a celebration.
Holy day. Yes, and typically the moons, the full moons and the new moons, those are times that are associated with worshiping and revering the goddess or the feminine, the sacred feminine in some way. Not everybody who's pagan believes in gods or goddesses, but traditionally, the moon is associated with a lot of different goddesses.
Okay. So we're going to get into the modern things that all come from paganism. And when I'm going over this list, Gordon, I was super surprised. I mean, like common everyday things, the stuff that we commercialize, the things that we celebrate everything month,
is pagan.
All that is pagan. Like everything.
You can't build a house and with the foundation and then pretend that the house you built didn't have a foundation below it.
Yeah.
Pagan culture came first. And all culture basically comes out of that. There's been a lot of efforts to remove it and erase it and change meanings and co-opt things, but it was there first.
But it was still there first. So much was there first. I'm blown away by that. Okay, knocking on wood. Okay, so knocking on wood, right? These days, knocking on wood is a way to ward off bad luck. But for their ancient Celts, there was a deeper meaning. What was it?
So for the Celts, there's this idea called animism, which is the idea that everything in nature or anything in the universe has a spiritual energy of some
living
type.
in some way, shape, or form.
In some way. Mm-hmm. You might call that a soul, you might call it energy, whatever. So for a lot of people, knocking on the wood was a sign of good luck because it was to let the fairy that lives in the tree, or the tree spirit, the dryad, or if you're Norse, you have different terms for it, but you knock on the wood to let them know that you're there, or to ask them for your, whatever you want to ask them. So it's good luck for that reason.
Okay, so it's good luck and you can ask for it. So you guys at home can go to a tree, knock in it, see if there's a gay boy in there because you're looking for a fairy, right? And ask for $1 million and who knows what might happen, right? Okay. Next, Christmas. Christmas. This one was, look at your face.
The most pagan Christian
I mean,
holiday of
like,
all.
The most. Considering that Christmas is a time when Christians celebrate the birth of Jesus, it may seem a little odd that it has connections to paganism, but those links are there, you know? I mean, the birth of Jesus, I get it, but tell us more.
So Jesus was not born in December.
Okay, let's start there.
So,
they lied to us.
Yeah, so we don't really know exactly when Jesus was born, but it's likely that he was born in the springtime.
Okay.
The reason that Christmas is celebrated on the 25th of December is because most traditions in paganism celebrate the winter solstice around that time. In particular, the reason for Christians picking up and choosing this date is because the Roman pagans were celebrating Saturnalia, which is a celebration of the winter solstice and the god Saturn. And it was Constantine who decided that we were going to celebrate Christmas on December 25th, basically to erode away the other traditions, the other religions and cultures that existed in his empire, because he wanted the whole empire to be Christian. So that's basically where it comes from.
All right.
So when you celebrate the birth of your Jesus, you're really celebrating the birth of the sun god and celebrating the fact that the days are now going to get longer.
Okay, so next time I'm almost pulled over. Sun God, please don't let this cop pull me over. Instead of Jesus, I don't know. Halloween.
Halloween is, okay.
And Halloween is coming up.
Yes. So most pagan people refer to Halloween as Samhain. But there are other traditions that celebrate holidays that are very similar to what we would call Samhain. Like in Mexico, for example, they celebrate Dia de los Muertos.
Yes, Dia de los Muertos.
And all of them really trail back to a celebration of, it's a fire festival, and it is the midpoint between the equinox and the solstice. The autumn equinox, which is also called Mabon, and winter solstice, which is also called Yule, and Druids call it Albanarthan. There's a lot of different names for these. But anyway, it's the midpoint between those two holidays. It's a celebration. It's commonly believed that this is the time of year when the veil between our world and the next is very thin. Okay? It is when the nights are getting very long. Mm-hmm. They're at their longest at winter solstice. So this is the period when we honor our ancestors. And, you know, Samhain is the Celtic name for it. And it's been picked up in modern, broader pagan culture because basically the religion that has the most cultural influence on the whole pagan culture is really Wicca, because of people like Gerald Gardner, and then, you know, later Nguyen, who founded Obad and all that. And we could talk about Aleister Crowley too. We could go into a whole thing, but anyway. So it's the midpoint between those two holidays. It's when we celebrate the dead. It's also traditionally a time when, you know, ancient times, we're living off the land. We have to start preparing for winter. So this is when animals that are not going to make it through the winter would be slaughtered and
how morbid,
eaten.
Gordon. God.
That's why it's so closely associated with death, because that was the time that they were slaughtering animals. So it's also, you know, a celebration really of the moon goddess, of whatever tradition you follow that's associated with death. And a lot of these traditions do have a goddess that's associated with death.
Okay. Days of the week. So it turns out that we're all pagans, because 7 days a week, at least if we're going by day names. For example, Friday, everyone's favorite day of the week, right, comes from the name Freya. Freya Norse.
Freya and Frigga. Yeah, she's the Norse goddess. All of them, really. Monday's Moon Day. Mm-hmm. I don't remember what Tuesday is. I know Wednesday is Woden's Day, which is the Norse equivalent, or the Germanic equivalent of the Norse god Odin, who you've probably all heard of before.
Of course.
Thursday is Thor's Day. You guys all know Thor, I'm
He's
sure.
Sexy.
Yeah, Friday's Frigga's Day. Saturday is Saturn's Day, the Roman god.
Got it.
And then Sunday is Sun Day, the day of the sun.
There you go. Okay. How about the months of the year? Same deal?
No. Those are Roman invention. And like August, for example, is after Augustus. And then they wanted a 10-month calendar. So that's why, like, you have October was supposed to be the 8th month, but then it got pushed to the 10th because we had to add August in there because Augustus was so important. So that one, you could say it's from paganism because the people that invented it were pagan, but it wasn't necessarily inspired by the religion per se.
Okay, something that we all do, covering your mouth to yawn. Okay, so covering your mouth to yawn is just a common courtesy, right? And especially during COVID, cover your mouth for everything, right? No one wants your warm breath on them. Anyway, turns out that that's not entirely true. Even covering your mouth to yawn has pagan origins. In pagan Rome, doctors had a clever but completely wrong theory about yawning and infant mortality. They noticed that lots of children died young, and they also noticed that babies weren't able to cover their mouth when they yawn. Their diagnosis: yawning allowed a person's vital life essence to escape their body.
I didn't know that, actually.
Oh, you're learning something here with us.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Great. See, they believed a lot of things. When you talk about ancient Rome and ancient Greece in particular, and you're talking about medicine, they believed a lot of things that were very closely associated with spirituality and not rooted in what we would call evidence-based medicine. The Hindus had the same. They had Ayurvedic, and then the Egyptians had the Ebers Papyrus. It's the same idea of, this system of medicine went on even through the Middle Ages all the way through to the 1800s and on. It's called the four humors.
Okay.
It's the idea that you have four humors in your body that you need to keep in balance. Black bile, yellow bile, blood, and there's one more. Phlegm. That's what it is. So, how I'm sure you've heard of bloodletting. People did it. The reason they would do that is because they believed that certain sicknesses were caused by you having too much blood. So your humors were out of balance. And It was all really goes back to that idea of the four elements, which are central to most pagan religions. The idea that spiritually speaking, those four elements make up everything in the universe. So
what are the four elements?
Air, earth, water, and fire.
Okay, I'll agree. How about wedding rings, Gordon? So I read that while wedding rings themselves are not explicitly pagan, the fact that we place them on our ring finger most certainly is. What do you know about that?
So it could be debated why we as modern American people wear wedding rings, because Christians picked it up in the Middle Ages and kind of took something that was old but reattributed it to the eternality of God and the union and everything. But they certainly weren't the first people to do it. The people to do it first were the ancient Egyptians. They wouldn't have had gold rings like we have. It would have been more like, reeds or wood or what have you as a symbol of affection. The only people in a lot of ancient cultures that way back that wore rings were kings and very important people, because they were the only ones with
money.
access to gold, especially when you go farther north where there's less gold in general. It was only kings who had that, and they wore them because it was a symbol of their eternal power. So in paganism, the circle is a symbol of the universe, the flow of time, the wheel of the year.
So if you were in Squid Game, you'd be wearing a circle.
Right. Also the sun and the moon are round. So that's why some of our earliest cave drawings and neoliths and whatnot are drawings of circles, because it was really the first religious symbol in the world is a circle. So the Egyptians did it, then the Greeks invaded Egyptian territory
and stole it
and basically picked it up. Alexander the Great picked it up, brought it into the Roman Empire. The Greeks and Romans, their meaning for it was more about marriage than just the whole being a ruler thing. So for the Greeks, it was actually something that men would give to the father of the bride to show that their agreement was eternal.
Got it. Give you a ring and a cow and a sheep, and I'm taking
your
daughter.
Give me that dowry. Yeah.
Give me that dowry.
Give me that dowry. And the Romans later, they basically took everything from the Greeks and they picked it up as well. Over time, it evolved to be more about marriage and that eternal thing. That's where you get the reason we wear it on the fourth finger, because it's associated with Venus and the love line. The Egyptians believed something very similar. They just attributed it to a different god. It's something that, again, it comes from paganism. Later in the Middle Ages, a lot of the things, in Christianity in general that are really pagan were incorporated into Christianity basically because you can remove the religion from the people, but you can't take their culture away. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to pretend that this was about Christianity.
And not about culture.
Right. Yeah. So that's how it makes its way.
How about Easter? So Easter is an important Christian holiday when believers celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, right? So that's just good Christian fun, right? Well, nope. Sorry. It's pagan. First up is the name. The term Easter is derived from Eostre?
Eostre, yeah.
Eostre. A Germanic, a pagan goddess.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the name Easter comes from her, from that Germanic pagan goddess. We don't really know a whole lot about her other than her name. She's in a few inscriptions.
Did she like Easter eggs and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Like, was she very colorful? I mean, like...
So her totem, which is basically the animal that symbolizes her in mythology and all that, is a hare. And a hare is very, or a rabbit, mm-hmm. They're very sacred in those traditions of Northern Europe, basically the Celts, the Norse, the Germanic people. Their gods, their families of gods are all separately associated with a hare or a rabbit. It manifests differently.
And Easter is all about rabbits.
Right. So Eostre, she is the spring goddess of that Germanic tradition, which there are many different spring goddesses in this area of the world, and they're all associated with birth and rebirth.
Are they pretty?
Oh, yeah. There's youth, that whole thing, because it's spring. The idea was the earth goes through a life cycle every year. It dies and then is reborn in spring. She's the goddess of rebirth. And the egg is also a symbol of rebirth because obviously...
chicken inside the egg.
Right. And this is also the time of year when things start laying eggs.
People are and women are fertilized, you breeders.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm not done.
Oh, okay.
So there's so much more to tell you why Christians celebrate it on this,
that
when they do.
Day.
So the holiday that's pagan, that's celebrated around that time of year, in modern times we call it Imbulk. It means first milk. That's when it's that midpoint between winter solstice and spring equinox. No, it is the spring equinox. I can't talk. It is the spring equinox. So this is when animals would start to produce milk. That's why it's called first milk. And they're getting ready basically for mating season in May. So the reason Christians celebrate Easter on that date, it's very similar to why they celebrate Christmas on the day they do. So the celebration of the rebirth of Christ, if you understand the origin of the myth of Christ, which is the myth of the sacrificial God, i.e. a God that was died or sacrificed for the benefit of the community. There's a lot of different examples of this in paganism, like Lugh in the Irish tradition. He died for fertile crops. Mm-hmm. You have, there's a whole bunch of different examples. You can just Google it. You'll see a million. So the reason why there's all those different stories they're the same, but you see them in all these cultures, is because that's the way the sun moves from the view on Earth in the sky. So around the winter solstice, the sun moves into the center of the Crux constellation, and it appears to remain there for 3 days. And then after that time, it rises out. So see where the story kind of comes from?
Yeah. So
traditionally, you would think, well, why don't we celebrate Easter on winter solstice then? Because that's when that happens. Well, I'll tell you why. There's this little thing called the Council of Nicaea, which was basically the Catholic Church, what became the Catholic Church, deciding standard dates for their holidays. And the reason they chose this date is a multifaceted reason. One is because most of the holidays, they were going off of the Jewish calendar to figure out when they should be celebrated. In the story of Christ, the Last Supper is traditionally a Passover Seder. So because of that, they decided that they would celebrate Easter on the first Sunday after Passover. So that's why. And the other reason, obviously, is we're trying to get rid of other cultures and promote Christianity.
That probably was the first reason. Lady Justice. Okay, so Lady Justice. All right. In courthouses across the world, you can see a depiction of Lady Justice with her blindfold and scales. These days, it's meant to represent the impartiality of the law. But actually, these statues have a pagan origin. Whether we realize it or not, these are actually depictions of the ancient Roman goddess of justice. What would be her name? Justitia?
Yeah, that's exactly that. And the way you see her in the courthouse is exactly how the ancient Romans depicted her, holding the scales
with the
blindfold. Idea that justice is blind. And, you got to think, these are, this is really something that comes out of Greek culture, that specific depiction. We're talking about, this is a place where it's their first early democracy. This is the rule of, the idea that the law is the same for everyone. And allegedly.
Allegedly.
So that's really where it comes from.
Well, you guys know how to party. How about Mardi Gras?
That's also where the Statue of Liberty gets her whole thing too, as well.
A lot of similarities in both statues.
She's goddess of the sun from the Roman tradition, but they're kind of like really close to that goddess of justice.
I mean, like igualitos. They're almost the same. Now that I think about it. So Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras is yet another Christian holiday that just happens to conveniently fall near a pagan holiday. So while these days Mardi Gras may mark the day before Lent begins, in ancient times it was associated with festivals for Saturn, the Roman god.
Yeah, so Saturnalia was a holiday that the Romans celebrated. It is to celebrate the fertility of the land, and this is, the equivalent holiday in Celtic traditions or northern would be Beltane. It's a celebration of fertility. Why? Because this is the time of year when animals start mating. So that idea that we are connected to nature, we're connected to all of this, that's where it really springs out from. Now, Saturnalia was one hell of a party. It traditionally...
Mardi Gras was one hell of a party, so they had a high standard, I guess, to follow, huh?
Right. And it became Mardi Gras because Christianity is so influenced by Roman culture. So Saturnalia was a holiday traditionally where they would bake a cake and there would be a fava bean in there somewhere. Everybody would take a slice. Whoever got the fava bean, that kind of meant you drew the short straw. So if you were the guy that chose that slice...
You get the ugly girl.
No, you were the king of Saturnalia. That means...
What?
Yeah, you were the king of Saturnalia. And it's like a week-long celebration. The king of Saturnalia gets whatever he wants. And mind you, they're throwing huge parties. They're having huge orgies and just whatever they want. Just all-out hedonistic
like
celebration. Caligula. Yeah. Just like... Allegedly.
Allegedly.
But yeah, exactly. We're going to town. And then at the end of that celebration, the king of Saturnalia was typically sacrificed for the fertility of the crops.
Wait a minute. So they make this cake, right? They put this bean in it. Whoever gets that bean gets to have a week long of sex, love, rock and roll, drugs, whatever he wants. They kill the bastard? Really?
Yeah, because it is the same story as the myth of Christ.
Yeah.
It's the sacrificial God. It's the same theme, just manifesting in a different way. So it became Mardi Gras and then the beginning of Lent, which is something you don't see Lent in the Bible anywhere because it's an entirely Catholic tradition. Because basically whatever Pope, or way back when we were converting people to Christianity, look at these pagans are doing all this hedonistic sexual things, and and now in the Christianity we believe sexuality is bad and all these things. So it became Mardi Gras and followed by a time of complete, giving up things and being very reserved and, basically to do the exact same thing, erode away the culture that was there before.
I tried to do Lent a couple times. I never made it all the way through. It was always for something.
I gave up Lent.
That's a better way. This year I'll give up Lent. Mother Earth. So in modern times we use Mother Earth as a way to personify the environment, usually in the context of protecting it. But pagan cultures have had a Mother Earth for millennia. When you look at polytheistic religion, you're likely to find some kind of earth goddess personified as a maternal figure.
Yeah, that's true. So around the different cultures, you see earth goddesses. Because in most pagan religions, especially the ones that are polytheistic, but because not all of them are. Zoroastrianism is monotheistic. But in a lot of the different pagan religions, the earth itself is considered our mother because it is the source of our life, of our food and everything. Again, going back to that idea that we're really connected to the well-being of the earth because it's our well-being, right? So you see, like, the Greeks had Gaia, who I'm sure you've heard that name before.
Yes,
Gaia.
sure.
There's the same in all the Celts have actually a few different that are associated with the earth, like Bronwen, and the list goes on. The Norse have their own versions, and a lot of the goddesses themselves, they'll have, they have multiple things they're associated with. So a lot of them will be like a moon goddess, but they're secondarily associated with the earth. Or a lot of them, like if I give you an example, the Celts in particular, I'll use the you've probably heard of King Arthur before, right?
Of course.
Of course you have. Okay, so in Celtic mythology, Welsh, Irish, and, mainland, you see a lot of these myths that are about sovereignty of kings. And the sovereignty of kings is based on the fertility of the land. And it's the goddess who gives the king his authority. So the idea, that, again, it's that same connection to that sacrificial god idea. It's the king's responsibility to make sure that the land is doing well. And if it isn't, you're out of here, bro.
Off with your head.
Yeah.
So this was one that we talked about before the show, and you said that you only knew a little bit about this, so I was going to stump you again with the Tooth Fairy, right? So although the Tooth Fairy is generally a fun fictional character for kids, children's teeth were a way bigger deal in ancient times than they are now. So for example, in medieval Europe, baby teeth were buried or burned to keep them out of the hands of evil witches. This is one tradition we're glad got sanitized and thrown away.
So that idea of evil witches is definitely a medieval and post-medieval viewpoint, definitely coming from Christianity, because, before that, the craft wasn't considered evil in any way. But I did have to Google this one. It looks like there's a few different traditions associated with this. I guess the Norse consider them to be good luck, the teeth. And there's a lot of different traditions where they're burying the teeth to protect the child because, again, we don't know where disease comes from. So we're thinking that it would cause ill to the child to keep it around. From what I understand, the reason why it's so popular in America is really because of Disney, because Disney popularized fairies.
And a fairy tooth fairy. I know, yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, Gordon, we're going to have you back to talk about all those other things that I can't mention right now. It has a lot to do with sex and the gay community. We'll get to that some other time, that Gordon is a happy member of. But like I said, we'll get to that another time. Do you guys have a new year? Is there something?
Yes, so Samhain, the holiday we were talking about earlier that became Halloween, that's our new year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have like a big celebration coming up then this month?
Yes. On actually November 1st is when we're doing it. The standard date is on Halloween, but because it's more convenient, if you check out Pagans in VR on Altspace, we do a virtual ritual for it. And I didn't even tell you how Halloween became Halloween and how it came over here.
What do you mean? How did it come over here?
How it became Halloween is that those people in England and Ireland that celebrated Samhain and then were forced to celebrate All Hallows Eve because Pope Gregory III hated that pagan holiday. Eventually, they lost the religious side, but they celebrated all of the creepy traditions like honoring your ancestors. And a lot of it became, you see a lot of what spirits would have been considered holy by pagans turned into being viewed as demons by Christianity. So traditionally that idea of carving, we carve pumpkins, but they carve turnips. The idea was to put a light out so your kin can find their way to your house. In Christianity, that became put the scary turnip out to scare away the evil spirits. Basically, it came over here because of the Irish emigrated to the United States and they brought their traditions with them. And Halloween,
We stole them.
yeah. They commercialized
But
them.
I'm glad that we got rid of the turnip. I mean, like, that's hard to carve.
I do carve them. They look really cool.
Just, saying. Make sure that you follow Gordon Woodworth III on all his social media platforms. Make sure that you check him out with Pagans in virtual in VR.
Yeah.
We're also going to add that link to our website and to our Facebook. So make sure that you follow Gordon and everything that he does with his beautiful little life. I love you, Mr. Gordon. I love your husband. I love your dog. I even love your cats, and I don't even know them. Thank you for being a friend of the FayWhat show, and I love you. All right.
I love you too.
You stay sitting there. I have a funny segment, and you might want to hear this one, all right? So now's our funny segment. Memes are that dose of laughter that can change your whole freaking day, just like that. You could be having a bad day, you got a parking ticket, all of a sudden, you see this meme, and you're like, my day's less crappy, right? So we added this funny segment to our show way back when, and this is usually your favorite. What do you meme? So here we go. Number 1, Detour to Gay Street. You see that? Do you see that, Gordon? So it's just a slight detour, just a slight,
That's the main route.
That is the main route for you, for us in the LGBTQ community. We made a real big ass U-turn and we went right in there. Number 2, can you feel the love tonight? The funny part is that the sign right by them says abierto 24 horas, which means open 24 hours. And they look like it's not the first time that they've done that. Maybe that was the first time they've done that on a pole.
This is Mexico. That's an OXXO in the background.
I love Mexican LGBTQ. Number 3, and the winner is... Wish me luck at my church's pumpkin carving contest. OMG. I would not take that to Unity
I
on
said
the Bay.
goat pumpkin, not goatsy pumpkin.
Number 4, if heterosexuals had labels like butch, femme, or andro, or maybe like a classic straight, or broken in straight, and ultimate straight, and loose. Loose was me, because, I was a whore. So, was. I'm married now, was. Number 5, do we have to know who's gay and who's straight? Can't we just love everybody and judge them by the car they drive? The wonderful Miss Ellen DeGeneres. I drive a 4Runner. You can't get more dykey than that. Number 6, when you are the only male nurse in the unit, but you're trying to fit in. The beard killed it. But you'll get points for the
He's
pink
hot,
and white.
though.
Right? He is hot. My wife's a nurse. I want her to put on that for me. Oh, yeah.
Or take it off.
Oh, take it off with my teeth. All right, number 7. Chick-fil-A trying not to hate the gays.
Bullshit.
They just can't.
They're
can't.
not trying to
They can't.
be
Look
nice.
at. His head is about to explode by that vein, and there's nothing that him or Chick-fil-A can do. And you know what? Your hate sandwich, I had your hate sandwich many years ago. I'm a little ashamed of it. And it was really good, but I'll never have it again, Chick-fil-A.
And anybody can make it. The secret is pickle juice.
I hate pickles. Really? That's the secret?
You marinate it in pickle juice.
There you go. Don't go to Chick-fil-A anymore, gays. Number 8, when you're in the closet but have to go home for the holidays. 3 days straight, semi-permanent. That's it. Very semi-permanent. Like, yeah. Oh my God.
And 3 days wasted also.
Oh yeah, no, definitely high. If I've got to be straight for 3 days, I need a lot more than just, being nice to get me through. Whew. Anyway, so that was What Do You Meme? A classic for us on the show, and we love it. If you've got an idea or a meme that has come across your phone and you want to share it, send it over. We want to hear all about it. We want to see it. Cuéntanos, and it might be featured in one of our upcoming segments here on FayWhat. Send them our way, also on our Instagram page at FayWhat YouTube, or email us at info@faywhat.com. So what a fantastic show. Thank you all for joining us. I'd like to thank our incredible guest, Gordon Woodworth III. Thank you for being the exceptional human that you are. I love you. You're adorable. And those behind the scenes, we cannot do what we do without them. To my wonderful producer, director, Luis Flores, our assistant director, project manager, David Fernandez. You both are just everything to me, and there's no way that I could sit in this chair without you both. All of you for letting us do our thing every week. We love you. And join us next week for another great show. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and like us on YouTube, Facebook, and IG. So here's my personal message about today's show. I typed in Google, what do pagans believe today? And this came up, and I just simply love that. I wanted to share it with you. Pagans believe very similar to what Gordon had told us before, that nature is sacred and that the natural cycles of birth, growth, and death observed in the world around us carry profoundly spiritual meanings. Human beings are seen as part of nature, along with other animals, trees, stones, plants, and everything else that is of this earth. We should all live our lives just like this. LGBTQ or not. So, get your costumes ready for Halloween. I will see you guys next week. Yo soy FayWhat! Thank you for allowing me to be me each and every week. Sending you much love, peace, and happiness to you all. Stay gay. Lo quiero.